Thanks everyone. I'm Angus. I'm from Weave Content Strategy and Design. So we are a consultancy based across the pond. Really happy to be here for actually my first time in New Zealand. Thanks for welcoming me to your lovely city. And I'm going to be talking about designing encapsulated content. So I'm going to start by explaining exactly what encapsulated content is. And I'm going to give some examples. So some examples of content that is well encapsulated as well as content that is poorly encapsulated. So you'll get an idea of what I'm trying to get across with the idea of encapsulated content. It's basically a quality of content that I think we don't talk enough about, especially in the content strategy and design communities, and I guess the wider UX as well, and something that I think hopefully is a sort of helpful set of things to think about aiming for. And I'm going to finish with some takeaways that hopefully you can, or building or working on Drupal websites, actually think about. So what do I mean by encapsulated content? Well, this all started with PDFs. So in my work, I do quite a bit of usability testing. And one thing I noticed over the years as I was doing tests was that quite often the participants would express a kind of a liking for PDFs. They would say things like, look, I'm just going to download, what I would do here, I would just download this. Or they'd say, oh, I'm looking for some kind of guide or hand. I think I might find that as a PDF. And then when they were looking at the page, when they were looking at our sort of web pages, they would say things like, "Well, I just don't know what I'm in for here. I just don't know how I'm going to get the job done with this content." And the PDF for them seemed to be something that would do the job better than the web pages we were giving them. And that really that was quite a challenging thing to hear, because aren't we trying to get away from PDFs? Aren't we trying to turn all our PDFs into web pages because of all the reasons we know, right? They're inaccessible, or they're usually inaccessible, they're search, they don't work on mobile, all those kinds of reasons why PDFs are bad. But I kept hearing users saying, yeah, no, I really like this. This PDF looks great, this looks like exactly what I want. And what I started to realise was that these users were looking for something. They were finding some quality in the PDFs that they weren't finding on our web pages. It doesn't necessarily mean we should just give up and give everybody PDFs, but it did make me start to think about, well, what are these qualities that people are finding that they seem to find really confidence and clarity in a way that our web pages are. And so as I started to put some of those qualities together, I wanted to come up with a name for it, and I ended up with the name encapsulated. And what I mean by encapsulated content is really three things. It's pretty simple. So encapsulated content is content that has clear purpose. It's content that as soon as you look at it, you kind of know what it's for. And if you think about PDFs, that is something that typically happens with PDFs. A PDF will be called something, a manual or a handbook or a guidance note or a policy. It's usually pretty clear to users what they're looking for. Encapsulated content has observable size and right. I don't know what I'm in. But if you download a PDF, it's got a certain number of pages. It's easy to check how many pages it has, and PDFs don't magically grow more. Once you've got it, and the boundaries are very clear. The boundaries are literally a file. And finally, a PDF feels like enough. It's not. Encapsulated content is content that feels like it's enough. It gives you that psychological sense that you've got to the end of the task. And again, a PDF is something that does that for people, because once they got to the end of the PDF, they don't feel like they had to go off to it. They've kind of finished. So that's what I call encapsulated content. And as far as I know, I'm the first person to use the term encapsulated content in the UX world, but I am standing on the shoulders of giants. So there are a bunch of inspirations for this sort of concept, and I think it is building on a lot of it. So for the developers in the room, you would all be well familiar with the notion of encapsulation within object-oriented programming. I'm not making any claims that I'm using it in a way or in a sort of rigorous a way as it's in OOP, but definitely the word encapsulation was one that I just kind of grabbed from OOP. And the reason for that is that I'm also really interested in a methodology called object-oriented UX, which you may or may not have come across. And Emma, who's doing the next talk, is actually going to talk a little bit more about OUX, but the central idea of OUX is that people think in objects. So people think in a kind of a noun-first way. And the best way to provide clarity for people when we do digital environments is to think about the things that they're going to encounter in the environment before we actually think about the action. Especially in the UX, we tend to be addicted to verbs, about tasks, we talk about user flows, user journeys, those kinds of things. Often we don't actually stop to take a step back and be really clear about the objects that those tasks are sort of operating. So that's object-oriented. I'm a content designer and a content strategist, and at Weave we teach content design. The central idea of content design is that every piece of content on a website or in a digital environment should meet an identified user need or one or more identified user needs. So encapsulated content to me is capturing some user needs that we often even in. And then finally, I'm taking inspiration from accessibility insights, and particularly accessibility around people with people who are neurodivergent or people who have cognitive issues, and lack of certainty, lack of clarity around the sort of the boundaries of a task can really impair people quite severely. I think it does that for all of us, but for people with certain things like ADHD, for instance, that lack of certainty, that niggling sense that maybe there's something doing, can really become quite debilitating. And this is a quote from a great book called Considerate Content by Rebecca Barry. It's a quote from a person she interviewed with who has ADHD. When I want something done, I want it done. If something is annoyingly complex or hard to use, it will play on my mind that I need to get it done and I can't concentrate on other things. And I think we tend to be quite good at signalling the end of a task when it's a transaction. So if you think about buying something from the store, you'll get that nice confirmation way to you. You've signed up to our newsletter, you've registered for. So those really transactional tasks, we actually do this quite well, but I think we do it less well with information. Tasks that are about learning, grasping it, educating yourself, getting background on something. And a lot of the content we create, especially around those informational tasks, isn't well encapsulated. That's what I call leaky. And leaky content is really content that has the opposite of those qualities. So leaky content is content that has no. It's just a page. It's not obvious to what value. It might have a clear topic. Often we're really good at identifying topics. This is the page about this, but we need to go further than that. We need to actually be telling people this is actually what you're going to. Leaky content hides its size or boundaries, and we're going to be talking about some examples of that. So it's content that hides, or to use a fancy term, obfuscates how big it is, how much of it there is, or where it begins and ends. And then finally, leaky content just gives people that niggly sense that it may not be. That sense that, there might be something story. Now, we don't do any of these things on purpose, and quite often we're doing these with really good intentions, especially a particular culprit for this is linking. Links are great. They're like what powers the internet, and they're what was amazing about the internet for all of us when it started. But often we're really unmindful about the way that we link. We don't give people clear signals, not mandatory. option when it's just information. And so we unwittingly create this. Another thing I should say about encapsulated content versus leaky content, I'm just talking about people today. This isn't an AI talk, but I don't think it takes too much imagination to see that the qualities of encapsulated content that are good for people are probably also going to be good for AI. And in fact, what AI is trying to do a lot of the time is encapsulate our content for us by giving us nice little summaries and things like that. If we can actually encapsulate our content well ourselves, AI is going to do a much better. So that's encapsulated content and leaky content. So I'm going to give you some examples. This has all been pretty abstract so far. So I'm going to talk about specific patterns that tend towards leaky content, and then other patterns that are nice kind of encapsulated content. And I could give lots more examples of each of these, but I'm just going to give one for each of those three sort of contrasting qualities. So let's start with leaky content, and content that has no clear. So this is an example, and I'm afraid my bad examples are going to be from government. This is from the Australian National Disability Insurance Scheme. I didn't realise when I put this example in the talk that it was going to be in the news today in Australia, because it just had a massive budget cut, very sadly. But this is a page about accessing supports. So it should be very clear what it's offering to people, but in fact the page is so vague, the headings are so vague, there's so much on it, it links off to it so much other stuff. It really doesn't make it clear what it even is. It's just a page about supports, not clear what value that it offers to people, not clear what people can do here, there's no real call to action from this page at all. What the takeaway is, there's no kind of summary, there's nothing that gives people just the too long didn't read version. And it's not even clear whether people have reached their destination, because this is a page that's really a combination of a content page and a landing page with lots of links off to other pages, and that's a really common culprit, or a really common way that pages don't clarify. A navigation page, a page that's mainly about linking to other pages, should be just that. That should be its purpose. A content page, which is about communicating actual content, again, it should be clear what its purpose is. A really common cause of lack of clarity. So what's a good way of giving content clear purpose? Obviously, you need to rewrite content. A page like that, you just need to redesign it around real user needs. But just a simple way of just communicating the purpose of content is just by giving it a label. And I always look to things outside the kind of website, non-website examples, I think are the best for this. So let's look at Spotify. So when you go to Spotify, you always know exactly what you're looking at. Okay, so this is a single. This is sorry, I can hardly read it. This is an album, and this is a playlist. So Spotify is basically is giving people a mental model that builds on their existing mental models, because people already know what singles and albums are, but also kind of adds its own objects like playlists, and communicates that model in a very consistent and clear way to people. Kind of always know what they're looking at the screen in Spotify. There's all kinds of other problems with Spotify, but this is actually something it does really well. So there's some examples of that first thing about purpose. Leaky content hides its size or boundaries. Can anyone guess what example I'm going to give of content that hides its size or boundaries? Okay, so this is another government website. This is the Australian immigration website, and this is a page about applying for a visa. And when you first look at this page, it looks like a nice, simple set of steps. Oh, that's good. Applying for this visa isn't going to be too good after all. Then you actually click on, you start clicking, and you're suddenly seeing accordions within accordions, and very, very long. So accordions are a classic leaky content. They create these TARDIS-like pages that just start off looking simple, and then as soon as you start clicking around, they just grow and grow and grow. Not saying there's not good good uses for accordions too, but we really need to clear guidelines around them. So accordions, real sort of leaky content pattern. There's other ones as well, like scroll, for instance. And there's also where content's on multiple pages and you're not making it clear to you. It's absolutely fine to have really complex content that has multiple steps. Sometimes that's just the nature of things, but what we shouldn't do is try to hide that away. We should be setting them up with to start with. So encapsulated content has observable size and boundaries. Again, a really simple pattern we can use to at least give people an observable size is just a word count, as you often find in articles. Please use a word count, not an estimated reading time. People read at different speeds. I'm a slow reader myself. I really like to be told that a page that took me 10 minutes to read should be 5 minutes. So word counts, nice and and then finally, leaky content feels like it may not be enough. And my example for this is going to be, it might seem really subtle, but it's the way we label our kind of link blocks on websites. So when we're linking off to other content, how do we actually label that? That's sort of related. And this is an example from a hospital website. And I'll just read the text for you. It says, help guides. You can use these guides to help you. Telehealth. The whole page was about telehealth. It should have already told you how to access. So as a user, you're just thinking, do I need to read these guides? And there's like 3 or 4 of them. Do I need to download them all? Will I miss something really important if I don't? That's the key question. It's not that. It's just that little niggling doubt in people's minds that we want to avoid. And then how are these guides? How are these PDFs different from? Am I going to get exact again, or am I something? And I'm going to give a positive example from exactly the same website. There's another page on the website where the heading is download as a fact. And then it says you can also download the information from this page as a fact. Just so simple, but it's giving people a really clear and unambiguous understanding of what. So there's some examples. So they're the 3 sort of qualities that I want to suggest we want to try to be aiming for. So as people who might be building or designing or developing Drupal sites, what are some sort of little nudges that we can do to try to encourage encapsulated? And as someone who's mucked around a lot with Drupal myself, what's great about the number one great thing about Drupal we all know is that it's content modeling, at least from a view. So Drupal's great at structured content, it's great at building content types. One thing that I've often found on Drupal sites is that content types become the property of business rather than, so content types are just based on business logic, and they don't really take the model into account. Whereas if you do try to build content types that are actually meaningful for users as well as the business, then you've got that opportunity to use the content type as a label and say, this is this type of for you. So that's one. I mean, that's not a simple thing. That's a big project, as you know, but it's something that we can definitely start aiming for. And object-oriented is great. Avoid or limit patterns that hide the amount of content, and especially accordions. It's everywhere on Drupal websites. We all know our organisations are not going to let us remove accordions altogether. People seem to love them, but let's just at least, when we're creating guidelines, let's set rules around. You can only use accordions for these purposes. You can only have this much content in accordion, and please no accordions. They go one level down, that's it. And then finally, when we're creating those related content views, another thing that's fantastic about, we all love views. We all love being able to create those relationships between our different content types or different pieces of content. But what we want to avoid is that implication that people need to go on and read. So I would really avoid headings like read more, see also. Those headings that sound like imperatives, they sound like you're giving the user an order. oh, do I have to read more, or can I stop? Is it okay if I think about headings that imply something more optional? So you might also be, here's some more content on this topic. Something that suggests that we're just doing this to be helpful, but if you've got to the end of the page and this is what you want to read, you're fine. You're not going to miss any life. So that's my three little takeaways, and that's my talk. So thanks everyone for being here. I think I've almost finished on time, which is amazing. If you'd like to have another look at the slides, there's a QR code there. And yeah, we help with this kind of stuff. So please check us out. We'd love to talk to you. And fortuitously, my colleague Emma is talk and sort of building on some of the stuff, especially about meaningful content. So yeah, to take questions, yeah.
Well, can it relate with the content? Or that's something like
Oh yeah.
think by the end of it we realise
Yeah, absolutely.
so like a lot of different teams.
Yeah.
But on that journey we also started to think around the shape and form of content on the book, and in the same year we also merged Asian skills into AI. Asian skills are particularly interesting because archive files, their content, but they're procedural in nature. They tell you how to do something. And a lot of content like troubleshooting or how to tutorial of some sort that's really very analogous to a skill. At the same time, we've now noticed that north of 80% of our traffic now in ICE is not people. We still need to have HTML on the site for the 5% of the time someone comes to visit. But most people actually experience our content via the agent, not through us. And so we sort of started feeling like we need to start writing content more aligned with the agent skill specification. We sort of felt like the AI could understand that it would be more actionable for the AI to carry out that task on behalf of the user. So I kind of had like two questions for you. They were kind of the same one question, so pointed to the same area, which was like, have you thought about the connection that capture content might have with agent skills? And then secondarily, how you might write a skill that helps people write pages optimized for that style of delivery.
They're really interesting questions, and I'm going to take them on notice because I haven't thought deeply about either of those things. But yeah, for bringing that up. I mean, I think there is a whole other talk to be given on designing encapsulated content for AI, and I hadn't thought about the analogy skills before, but that's really think about that for sure. And it sounds like you're absolutely on the right track there. But yeah, definitely what you said. When you go and audit a Drupal website, it's typically there's like 25 content types. Only kind of a few of them are actively used, or there'll be a content type that was just developed for one page. And the other thing that often happens is that there are content types that are purely about a kind of logic that has no not part of it, just part of the organisation's way of itself. So yeah, great that. I will definitely do some more thinking about the AIs. Yeah. I think that has to be part of it. It's like, what's the purpose thing? And for AI to be able to successfully process the content, I think, anything we can do to signal what the content's trying to do, like and even refer back to a context where we have a taxonomy of those things. These are the different types of things that we have on our site, and this page is an example of this type of thing. So yeah, absolutely.